I don't like change sometimes. I don't, especially when I see the world getting worse, when I see music getting fouler, the N word, the F word. I know I cuss. I don't use the N word. I find it interesting that so many people feel free to use it. But when a white person says it, it's racism. When a black person calls other black people that, it's not. We live in a funny, funny, upside down, moronic world. I drove school buses for years. Duluth, Minnesota, Denver, Colorado, Kettle Falls, Washington, Spokane, Washington, Georgia. I drove various church buses, which were nothing but used school buses. I took pride in getting my CDL. The laws came down in 1990. I got my CDL in 1990, got my air brakes, passenger, school bus endorsements, all that. And I took my job very seriously. And I always argued that we don't need seatbelts. We have compartmentalization. The seat compartments are high so the kids don't get hurt. It's ironic that I say that. I've had many students get hurt on my bus, tripping up the stairs, tripping down the stairs, falling flat down the aisle. There was a case where a bus was in a bad accident, and because a student wasn't seatbelted in, the girl was thrown to the floor and hit her head and was paralyzed by hitting the metal post of the school bus seat frame that goes into the floor. As a person who was well familiar with all makes and body styles of school buses and trying to clean buses over the years, I've determined that school bus manufacturers do not take into account that bus drivers got to sweep buses. Thomas and their C2 buses make the worst design for all the seat posts are great dust and dirt and trash catch-alls, as well as the driver's compartment with the seating area raised up with nooks and crannies. In fact, Thomas has more in common with English muffins than they do with school bus practicality. Nooks and crannies for pens and pencils and crap to get stuck in, and a recessed area to the left of the driver's seat that catches everything with seat belt and wires and air hoses for the driver's seat for all the trash to get caught in and under the seat. But before I left Denver, we had gotten some mountain buses for a program that I used to drive for up in the mountains, and they were regular sized Bluebird school bus with those ugly front ends where the fenders aren't the perfectly round, but it looks like somebody in the design department was on drugs with the aardvark style nose. I thought, what has happened to school buses? I miss the S Series International with the squared off hoods. They look like a truck. The dash looked like a truck with gauges, big 3-spoke steering wheel, an actual glove box. I will never, ever, ever like the new stuff compared to the old S Series. Standard transmissions. I remember growing up driving buses, and we even had a few split axle buses in the yard. But I used to argue against school buses. Well, if you get stuck at the railroad tracks, how are you going to get all those seatbelts off? Well, if you have a fire, how are you going to get all those seatbelts off? I've done seat repair on school buses. It's amazing how that stuff burns. One of the places I worked at, 6 months after Christmas break started, a Bluebird with a Cummins diesel, self-ignited, started on fire, and burned completely to the ground. Completely to the ground. Every piece of burnable material was exhausted. All that was left was seat frames and metal flooring. The only thing it didn't touch was the diesel tank. The tires exploded, and every piece of glass was blown out. The aluminum frames were melted. In fact, I kept a souvenir from this disaster. The bus that burned was a Transit. These are the aluminum frames. of the windows of a modern school bus. Thomas doesn't use aluminum. They're all plastic now, which is not good. This was made by a student for another driver I know in welding class. Made little doors, little lights, solid steel, lug nuts as the wheels, representing could be a Thomas or a Bluebird. You've put roof hatches. She didn't want it. She sold it to me for cheap. I'd gone to start buses after a Christmas break, and I walked around. I'm like, what in the world happened to 292? And I was like, oh my gosh. I did not walk inside it. It had rained, crusted debris. The tires exploded, showing their metal bands, steel belted. It was sobering. It was sad. Buses take on kind of a life of their own. I remember being in the heady days of school bus driving. You feel big and important. You suddenly feel like you're an authority. You go through the stage where you're angry and correcting everybody on the road. You're supposed to use your blinker. You're supposed to stop 10 feet in front of my bus. You don't run my stop sign. And it does. It angers you when you see adults, minivan moms, anybody, guys with suit and ties earning way more money than I ever did in transportation, blow through your stop sign, you honk the horn, and you get the mile-high salute. I'd love to take a video of that and walk into the corporate office and say, hey, folks, everybody gather around. I want to show you your CEO and how he drove around a school bus today, your CEO that y'all respect and admire. And I have long ago stated this, and I believe it to this day. You can fool people of who you are until they see how you drive your car. That is the asset test, not the preacher in the pulpit, not what you do in your house, not the games you play in the workplace to make yourself look good and the editing you do on a date. But when you get into that car, that's you right there. Are you rude? Are you impatient? Do you think you're better? Do you think you're entitled? It'll show up the minute you turn that key. School bus driving changed me. I used to do California stops. I had a 72 Dodge 400 V8 big block, 727 torque flight tranny, posi track rear end. It was a boxy Dodge. I got it up to 100 miles an hour without any problem. The truck got a whopping 4 miles to the gallon. I went down Iron Springs Road, leaving my girlfriend's house, and decided there's no cars. Let's open her up. It scared me. I thought, this is too fast for an old truck. It did it smoothly. I never reached 100 again. When I started driving a school bus in 1990, a year before that, I got a job as a church bus driver of an old 70s Lodestar International gas engine Thomas 30 passenger. Very, very fun. I liked driving the bus so much, I decided to get into school bus driving. I drove in ice and snow and blizzards and freezing rain, trips to Wisconsin, basketball trips, Superior, Wisconsin. I used to do a lot of their stuff. Hockey trips. I lived for busing 7 days a week. School bus and church bus. Used to get permission from my boss to pick up the school bus on a Sunday, drive it to my church, get in the church bus, drive the church route, go to church, take the kids home, get in the school bus to do an afternoon Sunday charter. I was wearing yellow 7 days a week. I loved driving a bus. I didn't care if it was icy. I didn't care if it was snowy. Superior Public Schools picked up the high school basketball team. It's snowing to beat the band. And the coach says, not me, but his team was running late, getting out of the locker room. We got a game at Northwestern in Maple. Do you think that you can get us there on time? I'm looking out the window and the wipers are going like this and not keeping up with the snow. And I looked at him. I said, sure, no problem. When you get cold snow like that, you can still drive 55 miles an hour. Nobody on the highway. Of course, I had to slow it down because the visibility was bad. But you know your bus, you learn your bus, and I learned to become a safe, good driver. But I've noticed something over the years. Something has changed. Two things. We're getting a younger crop of school bus drivers, and though not all are like this, somebody will invariably say, "We're not all like that." They don't have the same mentality that and yes, we have older ones that drive reckless too, but a new crop of school bus drivers is coming in and thinks that speeding is the way it is. I did bus monitor for a time, and I rode with drivers that were horrible, bounced over curbs, jerking kids around on sped buses, regular buses, sat in the back of rowdy middle school buses to listen to kids say, "Mister, this driver drives like shh." And inside I'm going, yeah, I know. What do you tell these kids? We're supposed to be an example. School buses are touted as the safest, but something else is changing. John Q. Public is getting more aggressive, more impatient, more rude, more entitled behind the wheel in America. You can drive your school bus safe. Somebody can run a light that you didn't see, and a car can just cruise right in front of the back wheels. And you ever seen a video of school bus kids when a bus flips? Compartmentalization goes out the window. A mass of humanity stuck to the side windows, the ceiling, feet in face, butt in face, book bags, stuff everywhere. But school bus drivers maintain the same lazy arguments. Oh, what are we going to do if there's a fire? Oh, what are we going to do if there's a train? Oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Most school bus fires start in the engine compartment, and you got time to evacuate a bus safely. We had a bus in Denver with smoke in the engine compartment. They were able to evacuate all citizens on a handicapped wheelchair bus safely. What I want to know is why Bluebird, Thomas, International, Wayne, I don't even think's in the business. I don't even know Superiors. I think Carpenter's done. Collins. Why do you use burnable materials in the seat? Why do you use plywood underneath the rubberized flooring on the steel of the bus floor? Why is so much damn plastic in the bus? Plastic roof hatches, plastic light panels, plastic dash. Thomas is nothing but plastic. Drivers love the C2s. I don't know why. Every bus I get into smells like a toddler daycare center and spit on toys. Thomas used to be good. I'm not so moved by them anymore. They're nooks and crannies for catch-alls for all kinds of debris. Their plastic surround in the front, which after enough vibrations and bumps, breaks off, breaks, flapping. And when these things burn, there's no stopping them. Unless you got a fire truck. And my question is, shouldn't school buses be fireproof? And people say we don't need seatbelts on a bus. We have compartmentalization. Folks, bus rollovers are becoming more common. And it's not all the driver of the bus. You got people that get in their cars. They don't care about a school bus. They don't care that you're hauling children. You're in their way. And even if you're not in their way, they don't like a school bus. There are a few people on the road that respect us. There are a few people that will wave me on, allow me to do what I need to do. But most of society today, rude. And I believe in safety, but I find that the biggest arguments against safety are school bus drivers saying we should not have seatbelts. If they have seatbelts, I'm going to quit. Well, it's coming. The NTSB is getting involved. And once they make it law, it doesn't matter what the states do. You will have to have school bus seatbelts. And I heard an argument at a place that I worked for in a parts department said, well, they better get more bus drivers if they're going to only have 2 seatbelts to a seat. These buses are typically rated around 77 or up to 82, 83 passengers. Standard conventional 71, unless they have an extra row of seats in the back with a hellacious tail swing, is 77. That's based on 3 little tykes to a seat. This is not India. This is not the Philippines. Why are we packing them in there? I lived in Hong Kong, and I saw public transportation. I spent time in the Philippines, and you get on a jeepney and everybody's butts in everybody's face. Not safe. The La Paz is one of the tragedies. It is the Philippines Titanic without the iceberg. The Doña Paz, excuse me. Filipinos, Christmas holiday, Filipinos going from various places in the Philippines by a ship to get home for the holidays to see loved ones, packed in there like sardines. Accurate manifest, unaccounted for. Ran into a ship carrying fuel, people sleeping on the decks, in the corridors, wherever they could catch some Z's in a late night. Ship accident, setting everything on fire. They to this day don't know how many people were burned and killed on that ship. There were thousands and thousands on that ship. Overloading is not good. And people say, well, they have cap ratings on school buses. Some do. School buses should have no more than 2 to a seat. You also have students that are so big they take up an entire seat. You have students that I've had on sped buses that were so big that a regular seatbelt would not fit around them, and we had no extensions. You have to take those things into account. You listen to the argument that school bus drivers, well, they have them on sped buses. Yeah, some of the sped buses have got quite a few kids on them too. Why are school bus drivers so against seatbelts? Now, I'm against the old lap belts. I remember working for Denver, and they had all the 80s Ward Ford automatics diesels. Kids would take that buckle and they tie the thing around the seat post across the aisle. They were a pain in the butt. I flipped up every seat since they were not mandated for the students to wear them, and I rolled every one of them under the seat frame and reattached the seat. It was amazing how clean my bus was after that. But now they got a convenient shoulder belt system, the 3-point that got you here and buckles in and comes across the lap, and I like them. I saw them on the mountain buses that we got. And I believe in seatbelts. I grew up in an era where we didn't have them. Pickup trucks way back in the day didn't even have them. They were installed later in 60 Chevys and pickups and cars. Walk between the front and the back seat of a car, standing up in the car, no child seats. The evolution of motor vehicle safety has changed. Driver airbags, side airbags, anti-lock brakes. Child under a certain weight or age has to be in a car seat, fastened in properly. But school bus drivers are against seatbelts. I have changed my mind as a monitor riding with drivers where I'm holding onto the seat and sliding off. Yes, there's bad school bus drivers. But even when the bus driver slams on the brake, they talk about compartmentalization. Have you ever hit your face on one of those tall seat backs? It hurts. You ever go around a curb and whack your head against the student window? It hurts. Have you ever seen what happens when the bus flips and all those kids go flying like items in a shoebox that's been overturned? And I just simply asked the school bus drivers, what if that was your daughter thrown and her neck gets twisted so that she's paralyzed from the neck on down and forever in a wheelchair? Are you going to be against seatbelts still? Well, they're the safest form of transportation. So was the Titanic. State of the art, 16 watertight compartments. Only a couple problems. The compartments didn't extend all the way up to the forecastle head deck. The Titanic didn't have a double hull that went all the way up the sides. They later added that in the Olympic. They didn't carry enough lifeboats. It always takes one thing to set a precedent. The International Ice Patrol was formed in 1914 to be on the lookout for bergs. A lot of good things came out of the result of the Titanic disaster. School buses are the safest form of transportation, but as I get older, I'm amazed at how cheaply school buses are made and how much they cost. Thomas with plastic window latches, plastic window frames, and the window frames are held in by basically two little nuts in between the window frames. And when the kids remove those, the window's going like this. I don't remember kids being able to pick that stuff off of Crown buses and old school buses. Thomas has gotten incredibly cheap, and I would hate for a major rollover to happen with those. But a fire, everything's going to be gone. The reason 292 melted into this is because nobody knew in the back of a bus lot when it was closed for the winter break that there was a fire. It was in the city, but it was on a road that wasn't used that much during the off days. And she burned herself to death. It affected me. I'm a very easily affected man, and to see a school bus melted, to see steel warped, to see all of the aluminum gone from the frames, the glass exploded into little crumbs, and to see nothing burnable left was amazing to me about the power of a fire. Bluebird Thomas and International can make flammable proof products. They're not. They build the buses cheaply, they sell them for a high price, and they pump them out. And the argument about a fire is school buses need to be fireproofed more than they are. School buses need to be at a standard. You got kids smoking dope. You got kids doing all kinds of things today. A cigarette dropped, a lighter flicked, can set the seats on fire. Some of the material I use, it says flame resistant. Yeah, like your phone is water resistant. And drop it in the water for a while and watch what happens. It doesn't work. When a fire gets hot enough, it'll burn anything. I'm an ocean liner buff, and one of my favorite ships was the Normandy, a French liner, which was Art Deco palace at sea. During World War II, when French was getting their butts wiped by Adolf Hitler and all the craziness of that time, the Normandy had steamed into New York, and they locked her down, and the U.S. confiscated it, attempted to turn it into the USS Lafayette, and supposedly a welder's torch ignited something and set the whole ship on fire. This thing is a steel ship, but it was loaded with beautiful, ornate interiors, all Art Deco. The fire burned so hot that hull plating that thick buckled and melted. Decks swayed down even more than they were originally designed. They pumped in so much water she turned over. Most school bus fires, and I taught bus safety for years, anywhere from a minute and a half to 2 minutes, a school bus can be fully engulfed. Most of your fires start in the engine compartment. People argue that the seatbelt cutter is dull after 3 uses. I didn't know people had tried. Most kids know how to get out of a seatbelt, especially a quick release. Push the red button. We shouldn't have 71 capacity on a bus. 2 to a seat. School bus seatbelts would solve several problems. For school districts that refuse to enforce bus discipline, and I've worked for several, they want to be politically correct. They want the monies associated with the head count. They don't care what happens on the bus. Their only objective is to get the kid from school. And I'm not talking out of an opinion. This is a bona fide fact. You mandate all 50 states school bus seatbelts will be in use by any student being transported on a school bus. Failure to do so, students' privileges will be revoked indefinitely. Forget these stupid, silly 3-day suspensions. You don't want to sit down in your seat and put your seatbelt on, you don't get to ride. That would clean up that. That would clean up that. Second thing, we don't need 71, 82 kids on a bus. That is too many. 2 to a seat. And you teach kids every year, this is how you exit your seatbelt if we got a fire. This is how you do things quickly. Leave your things behind, push the button, release, get up. Quickly assist your friend, get on down the aisle. This can be taught. And it amazes me how many people are against seatbelts, claiming to represent the safe transportation of students. A school bus flipping over could cause paralysis, death, broken limbs, damaged face. And to say that that rarely happens and it doesn't warrant it, people say a fire. Cars can catch on fire. Should we ban seatbelts? Cars can land in water. Should we ban seatbelts? Well, what if a school bus goes in the water? If a school bus goes in the water, even if we didn't have seatbelts, you're going to have a hard time evacuating that bus underwater, period. It is time to put sense into school buses. Shoving as many kids in a bus as we can used to be fun. The most I've ever had on a school bus with adults was, I think we figured 109. People ask, how did you do that? I don't know. I'd had a charter one night in Duluth. Myself and another guy went to University of Minnesota, Duluth back in the 90s. Picked up 2 college groups. They went to the Miller Hill Mall to go to the movie theater. I stayed with my group. He went down to Park Point, which was the other side of an aerial lift bridge that goes up and down to let 1,000-foot ore-carrying ships into the Duluth Superior Harbor. The bridge got stuck. He couldn't get back. I called him. I said, what is your ETA? He said, I'm not going to be able to make it off the point. I said, I'll do 2 trips and I'll take care of the group. I told the professor, I said, hey, we got a problem. Bus is stuck. I'll take the group back, come back and get you. He said, can we put them all on? I made a call to the bus. He's asking for me to take them all. He says, if you can fit them all on, go ahead and do it. Standing room only. The last girl to get on said, mister, your tires are bulging. I said, I'm sure it is. Stick shift, Detroit diesel, 80s Ford, Ward. When I pulled up at UMD, I remember feeling the entire bus rise. People say, that's illegal. That's illegal. Yeah, it was. There was a time when a cop asked me, we had a marathon in town and we'd use our school bus to transport runners, and I was the medical shuttle. People that got fatigued or couldn't run the race were brought to my bus. I took them down to the finish line so they could still celebrate in the festivities surrounding a renowned marathon along the shores of Lake Superior. And officer that was our school bus patrol guy for school bus violations, I pulled up a red light. I was full up. He says, you got room for somebody? I said, well, I'm kind of at the limit. They're standing room only. He says, you got one more. You can sit up there at the top of the steps. He filed the guy and I shut the door and he went like this. If the police allow you, you're good, right? One time an officer, I was one of the last buses to do a second pickup at the hotels to run them out the race. I came to the highway. The officer stopped me. He says, you still got runners? I said, yeah, they sent me back for a second trip. He says, you need to get up to speed because they got to shut this highway. He says, in fact, you're going to open this bus up because they're about to shut this road down, and I'll radio them, letting you know one more bus is coming through. And I was flying, going over the posted speed limit on a highway. Sometimes you got legal exceptions made by the authorities. Should we be overloading a school bus? No, should not. In regards to children, Absolutely not. Public transportation does it all the time. Subways. When I was in Hong Kong, I got on the double deck streetcar, packed. I get on the buses, packed. Armpits in the face. You hope they shaved. You hope they put on deodorant. Ferry boat, packed to the gun walls. I lived in Asia. It was fun. It was exciting. But I thought, boy, if this ferry sinks, we're all dead. We're not going to be able to get out of here. In America, our standards are typically higher. School buses should not have the high capacity. It should not be three kids to a seat. People say, well, we need more bus drivers. We need more of this. My experience has been many buses are running around half empty in most school districts out there, except for a big movement of people and those exceptional inner city routes where you pack the bus. We can do better than this. It's time for school bus seatbelts. And people will argue and argue and argue and argue. Well, I worked for the fire department. Have you ever seen a burned out bus? Dude, I've seen more than a burned out bus. Compartmentalization does not work in a rollover. Kids fly everywhere and they get hurt. We had a lady in Duluth years ago. She lost her job. She was a college girl, very nice. Everybody liked her. She went down a dirt road. The dirt road was somewhat crowned. Kids were fighting. She looked up in the mirror to get the fight stopped. And while she did that, her bus wandered to the soft shoulder. Right front tire grabbed the soft dirt. It was an old International V8 diesel. I think it was a 65 capacity. And she overcorrected, turned the steering wheel hard to the left. The back wheels tracked. The bus flipped on its side and a boulder punched through the side of the bus. Those kids all flew into that side and had minor injuries. She wasn't going fast, thank God. But it was weird when the bus was towed back to the yard. The first thing my buddies and I did is we walked back there and walked in the bus and saw footprints all along where the lights are. It was eerie. It could have been worse. Kids could have been very hurt. They could have been dismembered, or, not dismembered, excuse me, broken bones, paralyzed. Drivers have changed on the road. We're putting too many kids on a bus. And the industry needs to change the bus's fireproof rating. It needs to do better than it does. It needs to do way better than it does. There's so much steel on a school bus, and for them to burn the way they do is not acceptable. The school bus standard for seat compartmentalization makes way for dangerous burnable materials. This is just my opinion. I know that old timers will not agree with me. I think some are lazy. They don't want to deal with evacuating kids. They don't want to deal with that. As a school bus driver, we need to be ready to do what we're supposed to do for the job requirements. And I have changed my view. We got a problem with kids sitting down in some districts I work for. They will not refuse to follow the rules. You can write them up 38 times on a student. 38 times. I didn't write them up for petty stuff. I wrote them up for jumping over seats, a fifth grader beating up little kids, yelling the F word at little kids, running up and down the aisle, screaming and yelling. Took 38 write-ups to get him off the bus. 38. You have a seatbelt mandate on a federal level. We can go back to the schools and say he refuses to wear the seatbelt, is up out of his seat. That's a violation of federal law. We're not playing money games here. He doesn't want to follow safety rules. We have a right to say no transportation, period. It gives us more teeth. It gives us more authority. School bus drivers, there are a few districts out there that still back their drivers, but a lot don't. In this age of political correctness and getting everybody to go to school, the safety of the driver and other students is compromised while leaving students on the bus that do not respect transportation officials, and basic public safety for everybody involved. School districts need to stop pandering to bad kids School bus drivers need to stop yelling and screaming about the idea of seatbelts. School bus manufacturers need to come back to sensible capacity ratings and stop stuffing as many kids as they can in a bus. Less kids on a bus, two to a seat, proper seat belts, evacuate a lot quicker than a stuffed bus. I remember doing field trips where I could not get down the aisle. You talk about a disaster waiting to happen. You flip a bus with 71 middle schoolers on there where they cannot get down the aisle. You're going to have some injuries. You're going to have some problems. Not good, not advisable. The industry, the school districts, and the thinking of school bus drivers needs to change. Shorten up the capacity of these big buses. Stop stuffing them in there like sardines. This is not India. This is not Mumbai. This is not the Philippines. I lived overseas. These are students. This should be about safety. This is Pacific, signing off.